All right, good evening, welcome back. Chulin continues from where we left off, but first, we are sponsored this evening by Moshe and Ruth Greenbaum. Doctor.
Yes.
The doctor. B'zchus refuah shlema for the Chayalim who were recently injured in Lebanon. They should have a complete refuah shlema.
Can I have one more sponsorship?
One more sponsorship?
Also,
yes.
Also by the Giselson family.
By the
Refuah
Giselson?
Shlema for Sarah Bas Edel.
Sarah Bas Edel, refuah shlema. Okay, good.
Amen.
All right. See this on the fly. I love this, like improvisation. You think it's all scripted. It's like the Gemara is all there, right? It's already scripted. It's been written. No, just new things all the time. Okay, here we go. We are trying to explain our Mishnah. We're up to the fifth way of potentially explaining our Mishnah. We had way number, just to make sure that we recall, right? It's worthwhile just to make sure that we recall. We had, who was the first one? It was Rabbi Bar Ula. Rabbi Bar Ula came along and he said that it was talking about tameh, shechting tameh bechulin, right? It was a person who was tameh and he wanted to slaughter chulin. And we had to have a case where lechatchila was okay, but b'diavad it was lechatchila was good, but b'diavad it was also okay. Lechatchila, it's okay for a person who's tameh to shecht chulin. B'diavad it's also okay for a tameh person to shecht kachim. Then we had two versions of that it was a kusi. We were talking about a kusi, right? These are the folks that converted. We had discussed whether you needed somebody who was guarding and supervising the kusi the entire time, lechatchila, right? B'diavad, even if he comes in afterwards, he's yotze v'nichnas. Rava didn't like that answer. Rava says, no, if it's a kusi, then yotze v'nichnas, going in and out, is just fine 100%. So therefore, that's the best lechatchila way. B'diavad is after the fact. We can give him a piece of the meat and let him try to eat it, and then we can know that he's telling that it was kosher. And then number 4 was Ravashi. And Ravashi said that even a Yisrael Mumar, which is an introduction of a new topic, which we're going to get into today, so a Jewish person who does not require, he doesn't always keep kosher. He does it when it's convenient, right? If he can, he would. But if he is troubled, it's a hard time, he's going to eat whatever's available. So since we would trust him, we sharpen the knife, make sure that it's nice and sharp, and hand it to him. And of course, he's going to do it right, because what difference does it make to him do it wrong? Those were our 4 answers so far. Now we come to our 5th, Ravina Amar. That's where we are up to. How many lines down is there? Ravina Amar is about 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13 lines from the top or thereabouts. Okay, Ravina Amar. Ravina says, Hachi Katani. This is what our Mishnah means. Hakol shochtin. Everybody can do shchita, meaning hakol mumchin. We presume that everybody who is a mumcha knows the halachos of shchita, shochtin. Anybody who knows the halachos can do shchita. Okay, that's the rules, right? Because we're going to learn a lot of halachos of shchita. We'll all know it, and then somebody hand us a knife, we're ready to go. But v'af alpi she'in muchzakin, as even though they haven't practiced it. And the reason that matters is because if somebody has ever witnessed how shchita is done, you could get a little weak in the knees if you've never experienced it before. So therefore, we may have concerns that if you are going to be of light constitution, then potentially, if you haven't done it a couple of times, then you may wind up ruining the shchita by zoning out a little bit during the process, right? So therefore, lechatchila, he says, lechatchila, right? Everybody can do shchita. Now, bameh dvar mamurim, when is that? Sheyodin bo sheyodea lomar hilchos shchita. That is, if we really know that he knows the halachos of shchita. We tested him beforehand, he knows the halachos. Aval ein yodin bo sheyodea lomar hilchos shchita. But let's say we don't know that this guy shows up and he's going to do shchita for us. Well, we have no idea if he knows the laws of shchita. Lo yishchot. Don't give him the knife to do shchita. V'im shachat. But if he did, so then both can also, you can test him after the fact and find out if he knew the halachos, right? Then okay, but B'diavad, don't use a person who you don't know, right? But okay, but once afterwards, you can then check afterwards and see if he knew. Im yodea lomer hilchos shchita. If he knows the halachos of shchita, mutar lecho mishchita. So that is shchita is just fine. V'im lav, and if not, osur lecho mishchita. So you can't eat a shchita. Chutz, the only exception to this, well, the three exceptions are Cher Shota V'Katan, a person who is a deaf mute, somebody who is a fool, and somebody who is a child. Dafilu Diavad Namilo, even if they B'diavad did the Shechita, you can't rely on them. Shema Yishu, Shema Yidrusu, Shema Yachalidu, because they may make their error by delaying, pressing, or poking during the Shechita, and any of those things might invalidate it. Now, V'chulan Sheshachtu, Ahaya. Who is the everyone at the end of the Mishnah? The end of the Mishnah says, and everyone that shechts, right? If you're standing over them, it's okay. Who's the everyone? If it's just talking about the cheresh, the shota, and the katan, alakai, then it's just talking about them. Then it just should have said, and if they shechted, right? Because it would be just talking about the people we just mentioned. Ella, but the fact that it says vechulan means we're going to include other people besides those three. Who are we including? Ella. So what we're dealing with is somebody who's not an expert in halacha. So if we didn't know that he was an expert, if you had somebody watching him, that would be okay. Okay, but Bodkin also sagi. So we said we were going to test him afterwards. So we'll find out if he did it right, because we'll ask him questions afterwards to find out. So why do we need to have somebody standing over him? The answer is, delay se come on deliv decay. The guy left, right? We didn't get a chance to test the guy. And somebody said, no, but I saw the whole shechita. He did a really good job. So then in that circumstance, it's okay. Okay, that is Ve'ikadamri, right? Here's the sixth answer, is another Ravina explanation. But this time, somebody's going to give another explanation in the name of Ravina. Answer number 6, way to explain the Mishnah number 6. Ve'ikadamri Ravina Amar Hachi Katani. This is the way you have to explain the Mishnah. Hakol Shoktin, everybody can do shechita, means Hakol muchzakin shochtin. Everybody who has practiced doing shechita before has done it 2 or 3 times in front of us, so then they can continue to do shechita. Muchzakin afal pishein mumchin. Even if they've done it, but we're not sure that they're expert in halachos. If they know we've done kosher shechita, they may not be an expert in the halachos. This is the opposite of what we said before. That's going to be okay. Lechatchila. When is that? We see he's done this shechita before 2 or 3 times, and he has not gotten faint. If he has never done it before 2 or 3 times, lo yishchot, don't do the shechita. Shema yisalif. Maybe he's going to get weak in the knees. And if he does it, and he says, bari li shelo nisalafti, that it's plain and simple to me. I know I was fine during the whole process. Shechita sokshir, then we can rely on a shechita. Except chutz mi chereshot v'katan, not true of a chereshot v'katan. Dafila diyavanami lo, even if they've already done it, you can't rely on their shechita. Shema yishu, shema yidrusu, shema yachlidu, because maybe they have delayed, pressed, or poked their way through the shechita and ruined it. V'kulan sheshachtu, but if anybody else does shechita, ahaya, who are we talking about there? If you're telling me that it's talking about the old chereshota v'katan case, so v'im shachatu mi baile, it should just say, and they shachted it. We would know to include them. Ella, rather, ashe'ein muchzakin. What this Mishnah is telling us is even those people that are not, have not repeatedly practiced doing shechita, if you stand over and watch them, then it's okay. Why do you need somebody to stand over and watch them? We said that after the fact, all you got to do is ask them, and the person says, I didn't feel nauseous or weak, then your shechita is okay. The answer is, say, come on, the guy's not here. So we can't ask him how he was feeling during the shechita. Right? It's like ask the question, how does that make you feel after the shechita? So, 6 explanations. Obviously, the big question is, what's wrong with all of the explanation? Why do you need 6 of them? Why didn't one person say, here's the answer, and everybody go, yeah, that's the right answer? When you see 6 different people trying to give their own explanations, it's because there's a question on every explanation. So let's start off with that. Ravina v'Rabba bar Ula, so this last 2 are Ravina's answers, and the first one was Rabba bar Ula's answers. Why don't they agree with any of the middle answers, the middle 3? Abayi v'Rav Rashi lo amri. They don't hold of Abayi, Rav, and Rashi for a simple reason. Mishum de kashil v'chulan. Remember, we never answered according to those 3 what we do with that word v'chulan. Remember, according to the last 2 answers and the first answer, we said v'chulan goes back to the beginning, and we said that it includes those people that we said b'diavad because the guy's not here anymore. Okay, but according to the other opinions that we said it was a kusi, right? So who's the chulan? We didn't have an answer for that. So because they never really answered that question, it doesn't bother those three. You're going to see that those three are not going to like the other answers. So therefore, they are. They'd rather have a problem with the word v'chulan than Rashi says at the beginning. They'd rather have a problem with the word v'chulan than have a problem with the halacha of the Mishnah. So therefore, they don't. But it is a problem. So therefore, they have to come up with a different answer. That's why they don't hold of those answers. Kuluhu Rabbi bar Ula lo amri. Let's start off with Rabbi bar Ula at the beginning, who talks about tuma and somebody who's tameh doing the shchita. Why does nobody else like him? Why the other five don't like him? Why? Because lahach lishna de amart hachiyikar. Because you had two choices. Either where's the main part that this halacha should be taught about somebody who's tameh doing shchita? Where's the main part? If you're going to tell me that here, this is the main idea is right here. This is the time to put it. Adirabba Hasamaker. It makes more sense. Why would we put it here? It should be back there in Zvachim when we were talking about doing shchita on Kodshim, because that makes a difference. When you're tameh and you touch a korban, then you ruin it. Debe Kodshim kai. Then we should be worrying about it over there. So therefore, if you're going to tell me that, oh, here's the main idea, we're going to say, well, that doesn't make any sense. Why would we put it here? Lahach lishna damard hasamaker. And according to the version that we said, that no, over there in Zvachim, that really is the main place for it. V'hacha, so why do we put it here? Because Aidi de Tanakama b'chulin, Taninami Tami b'mukdoshin. It's a side point, right? Since the whole point is to start off talking about Maseches Chulin about doing shchita on non-kodesh animals, so then it mentions, hey, if a tamei person does shchita on a non-kodesh animal, it's okay. Lechatchila. So tamei b'chulin gufei lo itzrichle. I wouldn't need to teach him that halacha, because what was the whole reason why he said I need to teach that halacha? Because I might have thought that there's such a concept as somebody being over machmir and saying that I'm going to treat my chulin like a korban, and as a result, we want to keep the people who are tamei away from doing the shchita on it. Says the Gemara, chulin shenasu al taras kodesh lafke kodesh damu. That's not true, right? If somebody decides I'm going to make my animal like kodesh. It doesn't make it like Kodesh. There's no Isser Durabanan that gets created as a result, prohibiting you from making it Tameh. It doesn't exist, right? It's your own, you make your own Chumrah, you could do it, but there's no automatic generated Isser that prevents a person who's Tameh from doing that Shchita. So I wouldn't need a Mishnah to tell me that he can do it. Of course, he's Tameh, everybody who's Tameh can do a Shchita on a Chulin. It wouldn't make any sense to put that here. Okay, so that's why nobody likes Rabbi Bar Ula's point. Okay, Kulu Karavina lo amri. Let's talk about Ravina, right? Ravina just mentioned at the end two possibilities, right? There were two possibilities with Ravina. One was that he was an expert in the halachos. One was that he was an expert at doing shchita, and we said, go ahead and do it. So, Kulu Karavina lo amri. Nobody likes Ravina's answer because lahach lishna da amar mumchin. According to the version that said that he was an expert in the halachos, so then great. Then you can do shchita lechatchila, she'ein mumchin lo, and then if you're not an expert in the halachos, don't do it. So the problem is, that's not true. Rov mitzuyin eitzo shchita mumchin heim. If you've got a guy who is standing there with a shchita knife next to the cow, you can presume he's an expert. Because nobody's getting up there to volunteer and start shechting cows for people unless he knows what he's doing. So this is a rove. Most people who are doing the shchita are probably know what they're doing. That's a very interesting thing, right? As Rabbi Giskelson, I can see it's not thrilled with it. Not only is it, but I'm going to make it worse. Not only is this a rove, the Rishonim asked the question, but 1 second, we have a rule of rove keneged chazaka doesn't work, right? We have a chazaka, when we have the majority rule, right? If I have something that the standard is that it's prohibited, my majority comes up against what's the prohibited item? The animal. When it was alive, it can't be eaten. It's not kosher. So you have to change it from being non-kosher to kosher. So you're ruining a chazaka. So you're telling me not only is this rove, but this is a rove kineged a chazaka. This rove, the majority of shoktim are good, and it's opposite my chazaka. But 1 second. Right? That we normally don't say that. If I've got a rove and I've got a chazaka, the chazaka wins. So the answer, this isn't just a rove. One of the answers given by Rishon is this is not just a rove. This is a significant rove. It's like everybody who's doing shchita is for sure an expert. So that should maybe bother Rabbi Gissel some more, right? If somebody is standing there with a knife ready to go, that means that he is 100%. You can rely on him. So that's what he's saying. So it wouldn't make sense for us to have the halacha to say that if you're not a mumche, that if you're not a mumche, then b'diavad you shouldn't do it. We would presume that you are. And lahachlish nadamar muchzokin in shvishein muchzokin lo, according to the opinion that said no, the issue was you have to practice, right? So if you're practiced and you've done it, so that we know you're not going to faint, and so therefore okay. But if you've never done it before, don't let the guy do it because maybe he'll faint. Well, la alufe lo chashinon. He says that people are not that weak. We're not worried about that so much. It's not really an issue. Now, obviously, Ravina does, right? This is the answers Ravina does. But the others who don't like Ravina's answer say, that's not really that much of a concern. So, Rava lo amar kabai. So now we've got the three middle guys, right? We understand why nobody holds like the first one and the last two. Now the question is, Rava, Abaye, and Ravashi all had the same problem of the Chulin, so they don't have a problem with each other. So the question is, why don't they hold like each other? So Rava lo kamar kabaye, Rava doesn't hold like Abaye ki kushe, because we already said why. Because Rava didn't like the fact that Abaye said that a yotze v'nichnas, somebody who's coming in, is not considered like somebody who's standing there the whole time, right? And he brought the question about from Avodah Zarah to prove that somebody who comes in and out by the wine is considered enough to protect the wine from becoming yayin nesach. So that's why he didn't like Abaye's answer. But Abaye lo amar karava, why didn't Abaye like Rava's answer? He says, because hasam lo naga hacha naga. He says, because what was your point? Your point was that a yotze v'nichnas, somebody who's just walking in and out, is good enough by yayin nesach. But that's very different, because by yayin nesach, it takes a couple of seconds for the non-Jew to open the barrel of wine and put his hands in it, right? By shchita, the guy's literally holding the knife. So his mistake to ruin the shchita is instantaneous. It's not even something that you're going to be able, might not even be perceptible, right? So therefore, we can't rely on a yotze v'nichnas when it comes to shchita, even if we can rely on a yotze v'nichnas when it comes to yayin nesach. Okay, so that's why he doesn't agree. Okay, Ravashi lo amar ketarvayu. Now Ravashi doesn't like either of their answers because about the kusi, their answer was about the kusi, right? We were not sure whether we could supervise the kusi or not because kasavar kusim gerei arayosim. He says kusim are not even Jewish. Now that's a big deal because a non-Jew, you can't rely on the shchita of a non-Jew. Everybody else is saying the kusim are Jewish, they just are not keeping halacha properly. So then we've got solutions of mashkiach watching and supervising. But if the kusi is not Jewish, he could do a perfect shchita and it wouldn't count. For halal it might count, right? It's not going to count for, it can't be kosher meat. So therefore, that's Ravashi's answer. He can't hold him. Abaye lo amar Ravashi. Why doesn't Abaye like Ravashi's answer? Right? Ravashi said that this is a person who's a mumar. He's a person who will eat non-kosher if he can't find kosher meat. Right? So that was Ravashi's answer. So lo svirale ha derava. The answer is because he doesn't hold what Rava said. Rava was the one who said, you can just check the knife and hand it to this guy and rely on him, and that's just going to be just fine. Abai says, no, you can't, right? You can't. Lechatchila, to give a guy who doesn't keep kosher the knife and say, go do shchita. So no way. So he doesn't agree with Rava. But you know who does hold like Rava? Rava does hold like Rava. So Ella, Rava, my time, Allah, Kishmate. Why does Rava not agree with Ravashi? Ravashi's using Rava to prove his own point. So why does Rava not agree with himself? So the answer is, he does. Really, Rava agrees with Ravashi. And he says that it's about giving this knife to this guy, but Lidvarav de Abaye kamar v'leilos virle. He was just saying, Abaye, I don't agree with your point about this kusi and the fact that a yotze v'nichnas is not acceptable. I can use your explanation if you would agree that a yotze v'nichnas would be good enough. But he himself, he agrees with Ravashi's answer, right? That it's talking about somebody who's not always keeping kosher, and we sharpen the knife and hand it to him. So he doesn't agree with the answer that Abaye gives. He's saying, according to Abaye, according to your shita, that it's a kusi. Okay, great. But I agree with Ravashi. It's not a kusi because kusim are not Jewish. So therefore, he agrees with Ravashi. Okay, now we mentioned something. We're going to go back into it and see this issue in greater detail. Tana Rabbanan Rabbi learn. Shchitas kusi, if I have a shchita done by a kusi, muteres, so lecharchila, you can use that shchita done by a kusi. Bamedvaram amurim, when is that? Keshi Yisrael omid al gabav. If there's a Jewish guy standing there supervising him, that's great. Aval ba umetzao sheshachat. However, right, if you come along and you see that he's done the shchita already, chosech kazayis v'nosei lo, then you can take a piece of the meat off, then give it to him to eat. Achlo, if he eats it, mutter lechom mishchita so, then you know the shchita was good, because they don't hold of lifnei iver, but they hold of shchita. So ve'im lav, and if not, asur lechom mishchita so, then if not, you can't eat his shchita. Kayotzebo, similar halacha. This brisa continues on to the next thing that comes out of it. Matzah biyado dikuria shel tziporim. Let's say he finds a dikuria. Rashi says machrozos shel tziporim shchutin. Right, Roe knows machrozos are strings of, right, machrozos shel dagim, back from Eil Metzias. Right, you remember that? Oh, okay. It's the fifth grade. You weren't with us in fifth grade. That's what it was. Okay, yeah. You were not, hadn't moved in yet. Say fifth grade, machrozos shel dagim, strings of fish. Right, it's true. Right, machrozos they just seem like they were here forever. Machrozos are strings of fish. Machrozos shel tziporim are strings of birds. So if you've got a string of birds, Tosfos says it just means a basket. Right, if I just got a basket, bunch of birds. I got a bunch of birds, and they're all shachted by this kusi. And now I want to know whether I need to test the kusi to see if they are kosher. Koteya rosho shel echad mehen v'nosein lo. What I need to do, right? I've got to take some of the bird, right? I'm going to take some of it. Sounds like he's taking it from the head, right, or from the head of the bird, right? And he's gonna give it to the kusi to eat. Achlo, if he eats it, mutter lechom mishchita so, you can eat his shchita. Ve'im lav, but if not, also lechom mishchita so, then you can't eat his shchita. Now, that is interesting because it's multiple shchitas, right? So this is now teaching us a new chiddush. Not only can I rely on his one shchita, but I can rely on multiple shchitas of all the birds as long as we need any one of them. So Abaye, so now we have Abaye's point of view that you need to have a kusi standing, you need to have a Jew standing over him the whole time. And Rava said, all you need is a yotze v'nichlas. So the Gemara points out, Abaye dayik miresha. Abaye looks at this brisa and says, if you look at in detail what the brisa says first, you could see that I'm right. Rava dayik misefa. Rava says, if you look at the second part of this brisa, you can see that I'm right. Abaye dayik miresha. How is Abaye right from the beginning? Because it says, Tamad Yisrael omid al gabav. It starts off by saying that this kusi was doing the shchita and a Jew is standing over watching him. Aval yotze v'nichnas, which means he has to be standing there watching. If all he was doing was going in and out, that would not be enough. Rava dayik misefa. Rava says, no, take a look at the end of this brisa. Taima deba'u mitzos o sheshachat. He comes along and it says, if he found it was already done, you missed the whole thing, then you could do the meat test. Aval yotze v'nichnas, but if the guy was coming in and out checking on him and he walked in and the guy's doing shchita shapir dummy, that would be enough, right? So that's all that it is. Well, so therefore I have both Abaye and Rava can use this brisa to support their perspectives. Ula Abaye kasha seifa. But Abaye's got to explain why it says at the end that if you miss it the entire thing, then you've got to do the meat test. According to Abaye, you need to do the meat test if the guy was yotze v'nichnas and he just walked in and out. Marlach, he'll say to you, Yotze v'nichnas nami bo mitzot karilei. Because Yotze v'nichnas coming in and out, that is the case where he shows up, he walks in the middle, and he sees him there with shchita done. Right? He was Yotze v'nichnas. He walked in, there it was. So therefore, that you do the meat test. Okay, so that's fine. Rava, kasha resha. Rava's got to explain why it says at the beginning that there was a Jew standing over him. So Marlach, he'll say to you, Yotze v'nichnas nami komein al gabav dam. He says, because it's the same thing. Right? Yotze v'nichnas is 100% supervision. Therefore, it's the same thing as somebody standing over him. So therefore, it said somebody standing over him because he was Yotze v'nichnas. So therefore, that doesn't bother him either. Brisa says, Kayotze bo, similarly, Matzah biyadu dekuria shel tziporim, the basket or string of birds, kotea rosha, we take some of the meat of the bird and we give it to him. Amai, why can we get away with just giving him the meat of one of the birds? Maybe he goes, great, I did one shchita that was good, and he sees the meat that you're taking out, and he goes, I remember that one. That was the one I did well. And he's going to eat that one, and then you're relying on that for all the rest of them. So Amar of Menashe, or Menashe says, and there's a mnemonic device, Machnis, Ismail, and Bizacharim. We'll see how those words fit into each of the sugyas in a moment. The first is Machnisin, B'machnisin, Tachas Knafav. You got to put the birds under your coat there in order to shuffle it around. Like the shells in the baseball game, right? You shuffle around, so he doesn't know which one you're taking, you take a piece of meat. Okay. V'dilma simana hava yohiv le begave. Maybe he recognizes something about it. Maybe the chicken looks familiar. So Amar of Misharshia says, Demas mace le mas muse. You crush it, right? Make a ground chicken. Now you can't possibly recognize it. So therefore, by grinding it up, you're good. So therefore, he can't possibly know which one. So therefore, he wouldn't risk it, right? Before some question on this, what about rove, right? So that means the kusim hold of bato barov, right? What's going on there? It's complicated. Right, it's complicated. Vidilma, perhaps, kasavri kusim ein shchita laof min Torah. 1 second. If you read the psukim in the Torah that talk about shchita, the pasuk in the Torah that talks about shchita tells you that it says, pasuk says, v'zavachta mi bekorcha umitzonecha, right? If you're going to slaughter from your cattle and from your sheep. It doesn't say anything about birds. Now, why would I think you don't have to do birds? I don't have to do fish. I don't have to do grasshoppers. I don't need shchita for birds, for fish and grasshopper. Why? Who says I need shchita for birds? Right? So, who says maybe the kusim, so we know it's a halachal mushmi Sinai or whatever it is. We learn it from it. But the kusim, they don't hold of Torah Shabbat Peh. Right? So how do the kusim know to have shchita by a bird? So ultamech, according to your reasoning, what? You're going to say every detail of shchita has to be spelled out in the Torah? So, shehia, drosa, chalada, hagrama, v'ikor. What about the 5 things that ruin shchita, right? Pausing in the middle, pushing down. Chalada, we said, was poking through the neck. Hagrama, we said, was potentially when you go too high or too low. And ikur is if the trachea and esophagus are separated from the neck of the animal already when you go in. So, miksivan. That doesn't list it. They're not listed in the Torah either, right? So therefore, Ella kevan achzikabahu. It's just we see what the kusim are doing, right? Whatever they're used to doing, they're doing. So achinami kevan achzika. We see they do shchita on birds. You're gonna ask them, how do you know? They won't have an answer, right? But they do it, so therefore they just keep doing it, right? They're very religious. It's not that they're not religious. They're very religious. They just don't keep all the things if they don't know. Like if that's their tradition, they don't keep it. They don't keep it. But they were keeping shchita on birds, so therefore they just kept going with it. Ve'achzuk velo achzuk b'delok siva. Now, this idea, right? If the kusim, the question is, what are the kusim? When can we rely on kusim and when can't we? So, can I rely on them if something is written in the Torah? Can I rely on them if it's not written in the Torah? That's Tanaihi. This is all based on a machlokas Tanaim, and here's how the full machlokas goes. Titania, Brisa says, matzahs kusi. Let's talk about matzos, right? Kusi, it makes your matzah for Pesach. Muteres, right? You're allowed to eat that on Pesach. You don't have to worry about it being chametz. The adam yotze bo yedei chovaso Pesach. Not only that, but you can be yotze your achilas matzah on the first night of Pesach, right? Which needs to be made lishma for the same of matzah and shmura. It's all good on 100% kusi matzah. You don't see that in Lakewood anymore, right? Like a matzah, no kusim on it. It's not stamped on the package. Rabbi Eliezer says, no, you can't do that. They don't know the details of these halachos. So Rashi explains that they don't know when the dough gets folded over, when it's cracked, and when it's becoming chametz. They don't know those details. They just know make it, mix it up, and bake it as fast as you can, right? But they can't tell whether something's chametz or not, so they're not experts. So it could be chametz. So you can't eat their matzah. For sure, you can't be yotzei their matzah on Pesach. For sure, you can't even eat it. It's chametz. Rabbi Shimon Gamliel says, Kol mitzvah shechziku bakusim, any mitzvah that the kusim keep, harbe medaktikim ba yosem Yisrael. They're way more firm about it than we are. So, right? So, therefore, right? What is this saying? It sounds like he's agreeing with the first opinion, right? That they're allowed to use their matzos. But we'll see that, right? Not necessarily so clear what his point is. Let's talk about the Tanna Kama first. The Tanna Kama says, matzahs kusi muteres, right? The kusi matzah is mutter. You can eat it on Pesach night. Well, pshita. I mean, you just told me it's matzah, so can eat on Pesach night. Ma'udatema, what would you have thought? Lo bekie b'shimur, right? I might not think that they can't make a shimur, they can't do shmura matzah, say l'shem matzah's mitzvah. Maybe they don't have the ability to do that, right? Okay, it's not chametz, but to make it a lechatchila shmura matzah with the kavanos, so kamash malon, no, they can. Okay, so that's interesting. Rabbi Eliezer oser lefi shein bekiin beduktig mitzvos. Rabbi Eliezer says no, they don't know the details of the mitzvos. They could be chametz. So kasavar lo baki b'shimur. So that means that he's holding that they don't know how to protect the matzah from becoming chametz. Not just enough to say that it means that they don't know how to make it shmura matzah, right? Because he actually says it's osir, right? It's osir. It wouldn't be mashma to say the word osir if it just meant you're allowed to eat it. You just can't be yotzi your mitzvah, right? He's saying it's osir, mamish osir. Rabbi Shimon Gamliel, the third opinion says, "Kol mitzvah shehechziku bakusim." Any mitzvah that the kusim are keeping, harbe medaktik ba yosem yisrael. They're way more firm about it than us. So Hainu Tanakama. That's the same thing that Tanakama said. Tanakama said you can eat their matzah. We get it. So you need Rabbi Shimon Gamliel to say that you also he eats his matzah. No, ika beinaihu. This is the point that they're arguing about. Dechsiva velo achziku. So it's the circumstance where something is written in the Torah, but we don't see they keep it. So, Tanakana Savar, in that case, the Tanakama holds Keva Dechsiva, since it's written in the Torah, but you can rely on it, even though we don't see they do it. Right? They know they're supposed to, right? So they can read the Torah and know that it's supposed to. So therefore, the Tanakama is saying you can eat their matzahs. To which Rav Shimon says, no, you can't, right? If they're keeping it, then they're keeping it. But if they're not keeping it, they're not. Okay, so Rav Shimon Gamliel savar iachzik in lo achzik lo. If they're not keeping it, yes, then yes. If they're not keeping it, not. Ihachi. If that is the explanation of what's going on in our brisa, so kol mitzvah shechziku bakusim, the language isn't precise. Kol mitzvah shechziku bakusim comes to sound like we are including more than the other person. You think that that's all the kusim are reliable for? Any mitzvah that the kusim are keeping, they're reliable for. If what you're saying is true, in that Rabbi Shimon Gamliel is actually limiting, he's saying if I see something that's written in the Torah, but the first opinion says if I see it's written in the Torah, they don't have to keep it in order for me to know that I can trust it, right? And Rabbi Shimon Gamliel says, if they're keeping it, yeah, if they're not, so then it should have said if they're keeping it, then you can rely on it. If not, not. Right? If it's written in the Torah, it doesn't tell me anything. If I was a limiter, I would say im. If it's coming to expand and include more mitzvos, then I write what it says, kol. So therefore, it sounds like he's actually the more lenient approach and allows more things. Ella ika beinaihu. This is how you have to explain the difference between the two opinions in the brisa. Delo ksiva v'achzikubu. What happens if I have a mitzvah? For sure, if it's written in the Torah, I can rely on the kusim. What if it's not written in the Torah and the kusim are doing it? Can I rely on them then? Like, for example, shchita of a bird, not written in the Torah, but they do it. So can I rely on it? So Tanakama Sover, the Tanakama holds, Kevan de lo ksiva, if it's not written in the Torah, afagav dechziku ba, namilo, even though they're keeping it, you can't rely on it, right? So, because they don't know the rules, they don't know the laws, you can't rely on it. Rav Shimon Gamliel says, once they're doing it, it's fine, and they're way more strict about it than us, so therefore you can rely on their bird shchita. So that is their machlokas. So the previous brisa that said you can rely on their bird shchita is talking about, according to the opinion of Rabbi Shimon Gamliel. Gufa. Let's talk about something else we mentioned. One of the other things we mentioned was Amar Rava. Rava said, Yisra mumar ochel nevelos l'teyavon. If you've got this interesting case of this Jewish person who, if you give him kosher hamburger or a non-kosher hamburger, he'll choose the kosher hamburger, right? But if there's no kosher around, he'll eat the non-kosher. So Rava said, bodek sakin v'nosin lo. Check the knife, right? Now it's easy for him. Give him the knife, v'nosin lo. Umutzor lecho mishchita sonei, can rely on a shchita. My time, what's the reason? Kevan dika heter v'isura, lo shavek heter v'achisura. Since he's got equal opportunity to have the permitted meat and non-permitted meat, all he's got to do is this, and he's got permitted meat, of course he's going to do it right. He wouldn't do it wrong just for the sake of it. So, ihachi, if that's true, ki lo badek nami. So then why do we have to check the knife, right? So then if you give him a bad knife, So then he'll look at it, he'll say, hey, this is a bad knife. You know what? Give me a better knife, and I'll do shechita then. Why do we have to check the knife first? So the answer is, mitrach lo tarach. Because then you're relying on him to do an extra step, and that's too much work, right? He gets the knife, and he's like, "It's not cool. Fine, I'm doing it anyway. I don't need the hassle giving you another knife, sharpening it. He's not going to fix it. So therefore, you got to just check it first." Amrulei Rabbanan the Rava. The Rabbanan said to Rava, "Tanya de Misayelach." We found a brisa that supports what you're saying. Chametzon shel ovre avera. Let's say somebody I have a Jewish person. Right? And he keeps his chametz, he doesn't sell his chametz on Pesach. Okay? So, Achara Pesach comes after Pesach, and he's got what we call chametz shavel of a Pesach, right? Chametz that was owned by a Jew over Pesach, which is prohibited, can't get benefit out of it. So, mutter miyad, immediately after Pesach, you can go eat it. No problem. Why? Mipnei shehin machlifin, because they exchange their chametz, right? So what's going on? So Savrua, we thought, what's going on in this case? Hammani, whose opinion is this? Rabbi Yehuda. This is Rabbi Yehuda, who says, Damar chametz achar Pesach deoraisa, chametz that is on Pesach becomes prohibited on a Torah level to get any benefit from it. Vikatani, and it says, mipnei shein machlifin. So they're exchanging it. Why are these people who are holding on to chametz on Pesach? Pesach is over, and I want to go over to his house, and I'm going to have a piece of bread, and they're going to say, but it's not really his bread, because he would have traded his bread with his next door neighbor who's not Jewish, and he's eating his non-Jewish neighbor's bread. Alma lo shavek heteravach lisura. The answer is because he's got a piece of bread, and his neighbor's got a piece of bread. So he says, can I trade with you? Of course, he just trade. What? So therefore, you see that it's in accordance with what Rava says. A guy who does the wrong thing, he keeps chametz on Pesach. So, okay, he's not going to get rid of his chametz on Pesach, so significant monetary loss. But after Pesach, and he's got the piece of bread, and he can exchange it, why would he eat the usher one? He'll get the mutter one, he'll eat the mutter one. So therefore, since that's what he does, he takes his chametz, he exchanges it with his neighbor, his non-Jewish neighbor, he's got all new bread, you can come over his house and eat it, no problem. So that's why chametz over Pesach, right after Pesach, even for these guys who don't keep it, you're allowed to eat it. What, now you don't like it?
and that's said here as a rule, like
yeah.
you
So
don't have to know the specific circumstances of this.
It sounds like this is the rule. Machlifin, they do it. Right? We're going to see, right? That's it. They do it. They're machlifin. It's not even a question, right? Not because they might be, right? They do. We'll see that in a second.
This is by kusin, not by...
This sounds like anybody. We said this was a Ovre Avera, right? Some Ovre Avera. Rashi says, Shem Mevarin Chametz Hefseda. Yeah, it's a Jewish person, right? Regular Jewish person doing an Avera. Now, we don't paskin this way nowadays, right? The grocery stores, we wait 30 days. Well, why? Because you can go on the shelves and we see that they don't, right? The grocery stores don't quickly find like the Sobeys isn't going to go run over to find a non-Jewish store and say, hey, you want to trade all of our bread with each other? Right? They don't do that. So therefore, if you know they don't, then they don't, right? Okay. Now, Mimai, who says this proves Rava's point? Dilma Rabbi Shimon maybe this proves, maybe this is Rabbi Shimon's opinion. Damar chametz achar Pesach d'Rabbanan. Maybe the prohibition, if I have chametz that's on Pesach, you're right, it's a doraisa while it's Pesach. Once Pesach is over, though, then the prohibition is only rabbinic at that point. So then, v'chi mekilin, so when we're being lenient and saying, okay, if you go over to your friend's house who doesn't sell his chametz, you can eat it afterwards. Why? Because it's only d'Rabbanan anyway. Safek d'Rabbanan lekula. Right? So we're not sure if he exchanged it or not, but we'll be lenient and we'll presume he did, and therefore it's only d'Rabbanan, be the rice or makilim. But if it was a Torah rule like shchita, we wouldn't be lenient. So this wouldn't follow Rava. So v'tihavi nami Rabbi Shimon. Who cares? Let it be Rabbi Shimon's opinion. You'll see it still supports Rava. Because,
Rabbi Shimon.
Right? Rabbi Shimon. Okay. So, that's it. Miktani she'ani omer hechalifu. It doesn't say in the brisa that because I will say, I might presume that they switched it. Shemachlifin katani. It says 100% we know they switch it. Devadai machlifin. They for sure definitely do that. Uma b'derabanan. Now, what are we saying about this guy? This guy didn't sell his chametz, kept chametz all Pesach long. Immediately Pesach is over, and 100% for sure, even though it's only an Issa D'Rabbanan now, he says, I'm not eating an Issa D'Rabbanan. And he runs out and switches his bread. Now, Uma b'derabanan lo shavek heter v'chisura. We say about this guy that when it comes to D'Rabbanan, he's not going to eat a D'Rabbanan when he can avoid it. B'doraisa lo kol shekin. So for sure, in a case where we had a person who was going to be able to not eat not kosher meat and do the shechita properly, for sure he would do it. So therefore, it supports Rava either way. Okay, another proof to Rava. Lema misayele. Let's have another proof for Rava. We like this idea that we can rely on these kinds of mumars. Hakol shochtin, Brisa says, everybody can do shechita. Vafilu kusi, even a kusi can do shechita. Vafilu arel, even somebody who has not had a bris milah. Va'afilu Yisrael mumar. Even a Jewish person who is a mumar. Mumar just means that he doesn't keep rules in the Torah. We don't know which rules we're talking about. That's going to be our discussion here. So, hi Arel Hechi Dami. What are we talking about with this person who hasn't had a bris milah? Ilema shemesu echov machlas milah. If we're talking about, he's a good guy. He had a couple of older brothers. They died during bris milah. So therefore, we're being machmir on his life, and we don't give him a bris milah. Okay, that means, with the exception of things like korban pesach and eating what do you call it? The gifts to the kohen, right? For those things, for those it doesn't matter if you need to have a bris milah. But otherwise, you're not a mummer, you're just a regular Jew. You're doing the right thing by not getting a bris milah. So if that's the case, ha Yisrael Mayu, he's a 100% regular Jew. So why would you think you can't use his shechita? El pshita mumar la'arelus. What's going on here is, this guy doesn't believe in bris milah, right? He thinks it's bad. So he's against bris milah. V'kasavar, and what we're saying here is, mumar l'davar echad lo havi mumar l'kol Torah kula. The point of this brisa is to tell us, just because he doesn't do one mitzvah doesn't mean he doesn't do another mitzvah, right? So we got a guy. This guy says, I refuse to do bris milah. I hate bris milah. He goes running around, writes articles in the forward about how terrible bris milah is. Okay, that doesn't mean you can't trust his shechita. His shechita is perfectly fine. He keeps every other mitzvah. He just doesn't keep bris milah. Okay, see what it is, right? Some guys have problems with certain mitzvahs, right? So people have this. I remember when I was doing this was like one of the kiruv tests when I was doing some training with Esha Torah at one point when I was in yeshiva. So the test was, let's say you meet a guy, right, and he realizes he wants to become a Baal Tshuva, and then along the way he's married. It comes out that he's a Kohen, and his wife was divorced beforehand, and they're remarried. What do you do? Right. So now what you got to tell him? You got to divorce his wife in order to become from? No. Tell him to keep all the other 612 mitzvahs first. We're not going to do that. Take care of all those things first. That's not the way you do. Don't go after the one he's not doing, right? So you see, you could have somebody. It's from this Gemara. You can have somebody, right? Doesn't keep one mitzvah. That doesn't mean you can't trust him in all the other mitzvahs. Go ahead. It's not all or nothing, right? So fine. So therefore, there's a mumar l'davar echad lo havi mumar l'kol Torah kula. Ema seifa. Then the end part says v'afil Yisrael mumar. Okay, so we've got the first case, right? We understand the case is he is an arel, which means that he doesn't want to keep bris milah anymore. Okay, then next case was he's a mumar. Now, what does that mean? Hi mumar hechidami. What's the case of the mumar? I mumar l'davar acher. If he's a mumar for some other type of mitzvah, right? So then hari mumar l'reos. That's the same case. You just told me that a guy who doesn't keep bris milah, so I can still trust his shechita. So what difference does it make what that mitzvah is, right? This guy doesn't daven 3 times a day. I can still trust his shechita. So I get it. He doesn't do this mitzvah. He keeps this mitzvah. So there can't be any other mitzvah. So therefore, el lav mumar l'osa davar. We must be talking about this mitzvah. He's a mumar. He doesn't keep shechita. He'll eat non-kosher. And therefore, it's the Rava. It's like Rava says. He doesn't keep shechita, but he will. If you show it to me, take care of all the issue, he'll do it. Okay. No. That's not what's going on in this brisa. Okay. We'll say no. Maybe Rav is not correct, and maybe that he's a mumar for shchita, we wouldn't trust him. My time, but what was the reason? Why? Because once this guy thinks shchita is not that important, So it's not just that he'll do it when he can and he doesn't do it when he can't. He just, in his mind, he starts to think this isn't important at all. So therefore, there's never a reason to do it, right? That's the way our Yetzer Hara works, is that once you get used to doing an Aveira, you don't say to yourself, I'm really doing the wrong thing, I should be better, but I'm not there yet. People say, that's because it's completely mutter, it's fine. Shechita is not important, that's what he's thinking. So therefore, she's not important, he's never going to do it right. So rather, what's the last case of Mumar this last case? Mumar la'avodos kochavim. We have a circumstance where a person is actually an idol worshiper, and you can trust his shechita. Rav Anan, like Rav Anan said, Rav Anan said the name of Shmuel, Yisrael mumar la'avodos kochavim. If you have a Jewish person who worships idols, so you can eat his shechita. You might have thought that avodah zarah is way worse, right? I could see that Idan does think that way, right? It's way worse. Nevertheless, okay, yes, right. We see that nevertheless he's going to do his shechita right because he worships Hashem and avodah zarah, right? Must be that we had that sort of a thing in the
as a trilogy of some sort,
or something like that. Yeah, it could be that. Or like I think we had said at the end of Menachos, where we had Elokei Elokim, that they worship avodah zarah, but then there's a God on top of that. Right, maybe, right? Gufa. Let's talk about this issue a little bit further. Amar Rav Anan. Rav Anan said this astonishing thing that still has us perplexed and holding our heads. Amar Rav Anan says the name of Shmuel. Yisrael mumar la'avodos kochavim. If I've got a Yisrael who's a mumar to idol worship, muter l'chol mishchita, so I can eat a shchita. Shekain matzinu b'Yehoshaphat melech Yehuda shenen mesudas achav. Story time. Yehoshaphat became the king of Yehuda, and he was a big tzaddik. He was getting rid of all of the avodah zarah, getting rid of all the things. And Achav was the king of Yisrael, and he was a terrible rasha. And he was trying to kill all of the Nevi'im, and they all had to go hide in caves in order to hide from him. Eliyahu Navi was famous for beating out the Nevi'e Baal at that time. Well, Achav gets himself into a pickle with the king of Aram, and he decides, let's make an alliance. Yehoshaphat and me will go attack the king of Aram together. So he wants to get Yehoshaphat on his side. So he invites Yehoshaphat over for lunch, right? Nice stately dinner, right? And so the pasuk says, Shnemar, Vayizbach lo Achav tsonu bakar larov v'lama sherimo, right? So Achav, right? He gets and he slaughters sheep and cattle, a lot of them, for the people that are coming and all the people that were coming with him. Vayasi sehu la'alos el ramos gilad, and he tries to seduce, convince, right? We had the word mesis, we use that word mesis for seduce to try to convince somebody to do avodah zarah, right? He tries to convince him to come to a Ramos Gilad to go fight in the war with him, which eventually Achav dies in. V'dilma mizbach zavach michal lo achol. Okay, so what are you seeing? You're seeing Achav was a big avodah zarah guy. Yehoshaphat's a big tzaddik. And Yehoshaphat came over for dinner and he ate. So he says he ate. Maybe he shechted it. We've all been there, right? You show up and you don't trust the kashrus, so you just stand there, you don't eat, right? So maybe that's what he did.
Salad, maybe.
Right. So the answer is, Vayasiseu. He tried to convince him. This is the Shita of Kahal Yereim right here, right? We're going to see in a moment, right? So he tried to seduce, he tried to convince him. So that means he had to invite him over and eat. V'dilma bidvar, maybe he just was trying to talk to him. He tried to convince him. He goes, no, ein hasasa bidvarim. You can never convince anybody without food, right? There's a Kahal Yereim, right? This is it. So the Kahal Yereim way. So you need to have some food. Vilo, 1 second. Is that true? Right? The pasuk says, it says in the Torah about somebody's trying to convince you to do avodah zarah. If your brother will try to convince you to do avodah zarah, so therefore he's just what? How's he convincing you to do avodah zarah? He's talking to you. No. No, he invites you over for food, right? You bring him over, and that's how he's trying to convince you. Okay, the pasuk says, "V'atisiseini bo libal ochinam," right? By the Satan convinces Hashem to test Eov. And he uses the word, he seduces him, he convinces him in order to test Eov. So Hashem doesn't eat. So how are you going to explain that one? L'malashani, Hashem's different, right? Okay, Hashem, you can talk to him and convince him, but human beings need some meat. V'dilma mishtas ishti. Okay, fine. Maybe he had a drink. Came over, the wine was good. right? So he had a drink, mechalocha, but he didn't eat the meat. So how does that help you? Maishnoshia, right? So, I mean, what's the difference by the drinking? Right, the drinking, he was a ovid avodah zara. Damrina mumer lavros kochavim lo ave mumer l'chol Torah kula. So we say, okay, he could drink the wine because he's not going to make yayin nesech just because he's ovid avodah zara doesn't mean, right, that he's going to make his wine usher like the non-Jews do. Achilanami. So the eating also. Mumer lavros kochavim lo ave mumer l'chol Torah kula. So then we would say that somebody who's doing the avodah zara, so his kashrus is kosher. Hachi hashta, what are you talking about? Shtia, when it comes to drinking the wine, stam yenamhu. What kind of wine is this? We don't know whether it is of oved, whether he's oved avodah zara and he's making the wine into yayin nesach. It has a din of stam yenon. Stam yenon is wine we don't know about that was in possession of an idolater. That wine is usr. But why is usr? It's usr midirabanan. Came about during the times of Hillel that they made that this wine that was owned by non-Jews or that was unsealed wine, they made it also, maybe they would pour it in order to do for avodah zara. But if you don't know that they did, then it's just stam yenon. At that time, back then, there was no halacha of stam yenon. That didn't get invented yet. The wine was kosher. Non-Jewish wine was still mutter back then, so it wasn't an issue. Aval achila, but as far as eating the meat, I will say to you, so maybe the fact that he's worshiping avodah zarah means he doesn't do shechita properly. So maybe he was drinking and he wasn't eating. Ibois ema, or else, so therefore we could say that maybe he didn't eat. Ibois ema, or else, I'll say, lav urcha de malka mishtia velo michla. It doesn't make sense. A king's going to show up and he's going to drink, he's not going to eat, right? That's not a stately meal. One doesn't show up and have a glass of wine without having some food. V'boisim else, vayizbach, it says, and he slaughtered, vayisisehu, and then he was convincing him, ksiv, b'mehesiso. So the two are connected. How did he try to convince him? Bizvicha, with the food that he slaughtered. So it sounds like he ate it. Okay? So therefore, again, if we can prove that Yehoshaphat ate it, it indicates that somebody who worships avodah zarah, you can trust their shechita. Okay, well, Badilma Ovadia Zavach. You know who used to work for Achav? Ovadia, who's a big Navi, right? Ovadia is famous because the Haftorah, Ovadia is read, it's one parak, it's read as the Haftorah for Parshas Vayishlach, which is the section about Esav. And the Gemara in Sanhedrin had told us that it was because he was amongst Rishayim. Right, he lived in Achav's house, and it was amongst Rishayim, and he was immune from the negativity of the Rishayim and stayed at Tzaddik. Esav, on the other hand, was the opposite, right? Because Esav was born in Tzaddikim, and he was immune from the influence of them, and he grew up a Rasha. So it made sense that Ovadia was the antidote to Esav, right? So that Esav, you are the one who became a Rasha. I am the one who became a tzaddik despite being around Rishayim. But Ovadia is in the household of Achav. So how did, maybe Yehoshaphat ate from, like he had the one kosher piece, right? He had the kosher animal that Ovadia made, right? So maybe that's how it happened.
Or is the kosher meal?
Right. That's right. So the answer is no, larov ksiv. It says they had a lot of meats. Ovadia, law of a supik. It wouldn't be possible for Ovadia to be sitting there doing shechita all day, right? So that wouldn't make sense that he did shechita and all the meat was kosher because Ovadia did the shechita. V'dilma shivas alafim, maybe zavuach. Maybe there were 7,000 tzaddikim, right? That there were 7,000 tzaddikim that were around during Achav's time. He was hunting them down. So maybe they shechted it. The pasuk says, "V'yishar to be Yisrael shivas alafim." There were 7,000 neviim tzaddikim that were left. Kol habirkayim asher lo karu lebal. They had not been. They were ones that had refused to worship the Baal. So maybe they were the ones who did the shechita. Well, that can't be. Tamuri hava mitamri meizevel. Remember, they were hiding. They went in hidden caves in order to get away from Izevel. So therefore, it's not possible that they were around to do the shechita. How could they be doing shechita for Achav after they're in hiding in caves? Well, maybe some of the 7,000 weren't in hiding. V'dilma gavri da'achav havu malu. So maybe they worked. They were working for Achav, right? And maybe since they worked for Achav, they got a pardon, and they weren't getting killed. So lo saka daitach. Don't think that because dichsiv, the pasuk says. I'm sorry, take that back. Right. So therefore, they. If Achav had people working for him that were fine, he says, don't think that way because dichsiv, the pasuk says, Moshe makshiv al dvar sheker kol mishar sav rishayim. Somebody who is a ruler and listens to things that are false, everybody who serves him is wicked. Meaning, if Achav is so bad, none of the people who were working for him were any good either, right? That's the bad, right? The core values of the company were no good. So therefore, nobody there was any good. So nobody was doing shechita properly. V'dilma gavri de Yoshafat nami lo havu malu. Maybe Yoshafat, maybe his people weren't keeping kosher. Maybe Yoshafat kept kosher, right? And so maybe he ate a little bit of the meat from Ovadia, and all the people that were with him, they didn't eat that much meat that was kosher because Ovadia. Because Yoshafat, maybe the people with him weren't keeping kosher. So Zavuach Gavri de Achav Ochel Gavri de Yoshafat. The people that Achav's people ate, so then Yoshafat's people ate. Zavuach Ovadia Ochel Yoshafat. But Ovadia shechted, that's what Yoshafat ate. Lo Sakadaitach. Don't think that because Midemosho Makshiv al Dvar Sheker Kol Mishar Sav that pasuk, that wicked people have wicked people working for them. Hal Dvar Emes Mishar Sav Tzadikim. It means the other way too. You have a righteous boss. Then all the people start doing the right things. So therefore it goes both ways. So Yoshafat's people were not bad. V'dilma zavuch gavri da'achav, achal achav v'gavrei. Okay. Maybe what happened was, Achav's people slaughtered the meat, right? And Achav's people ate the meat. Zavuch gavri Yoshafat, and Yoshafat sent ahead his guys, and they shechted the meat for him. Aval Yoshafat v'gavrei, lo hava maflig nafshe minei. Right, sorry. Zavuch Gavri Yoshafat, Achel Yoshafat v'Gavrei. But that which the Yoshafat ate, so the Yoshafat's people made, then that's what they ate. So the answer is, Lo hava maflig nafshe minei. It doesn't seem like, if you read the story that's going on there, that Yoshafat was separating himself and his people, right? He didn't bring his own food, right? It didn't sound like he brought his own lunchbox. That wasn't seen what it was happening. And how do you see that? Because look at the psukim. It says, "Kamoni kamocha ka'ami ka'amcha." This is what Achav says. My people, mine are like yours, and my nation's like yours. We'll all be one group together. Elameata, if that's the case, right? So that sounds like they're all eating together, right? Well, you'll eat my food, I'll eat your food, eat my food, and that'll be all together. Elameata, well, if that's what you're going to explain it, kisuse kisusecha, my horses are like your horses. What does that mean? Hachanami, that means that, right? Our horses can eat each other's food. I mean, that makes no sense. That's not what we're talking about. Ella, what we mean is, whatever will happen to your horses in war will happen to my horses in war. We're going to go to war together. That's what it meant. Hachanami, and therefore that's what he means also by the rest of it. Whatever is going to happen to you and your nation will happen to me and my nation. We'll all be people together. Ella, so therefore that's not the proof that they ate together. Ella mehacha, this part. Umelch Yisrael v'Yehoshafat melch Yehuda yoshvim ish al kis'o melubashim begodim. The king of Yisrael and Yehoshaphat, the king of Yehuda, they sat down together in their own thrones, and they were wearing garments begoren Pesach Shar Shomron, in the opening of the threshing floor of the gates of Shomron. So my goren, what does that mean, the threshing floor? Ilema goren mamash, mean that there was a threshing floor at the opening of Shomron? Atushar Shomron goren hava. Is that possible? Can't be possible. It says in Maseches Baba Basra, you keep a threshing floor away from the city walls. You don't bring them into because they're not pleasant. They're eyesores. So you don't put them right in the gate. Doesn't mean goren. Rather, what we mean is that the way they were sitting was like a threshing floor. Ditznan, as we learned in the Mishnah in Sanhedrin. Sanhedrin haisa kechatzi goren agula. The Sanhedrin used to sit in a round formation, like a half circle, so they could all see each other. And so therefore, that's what they were doing. They were all the original Knights of the Round Table, right? They were all sitting around so they could all see each other. Clearly, they were all eating together. And therefore, you see that Yoshafat was eating the food that Achav made, which means that somebody who's worship of Avodah Zarah, somebody who's a tzaddik, can eat. Okay, stop here.
Beautiful. Go ahead.